皆様。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We would now like to start ASEAN-Japan Business Week. Thank you very much for attending in such a large number. In opening the event, I would like to call upon Mr. Kajiyama Hiroshi, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan, to speak.
Good afternoon to all of you. I am Kajiyama Hiroshi, Meeting Minister. Thank you very much for attending Japan ASEAN Business Week. First, I sincerely express my gratitude to all the relevant organizations and speakers from both Japan and ASEAN for cooperating to co-host this meeting. The economic relations with ASEAN, built over about a half century, has constantly been evolving, reflecting the nature of the times. Especially since 1990s, many Japanese companies had positioned ASEAN as an important base, and together with ASEAN, which was working toward regional economic integration, have contributed to the building of regional supply chain and have formed win-win relations. ASEAN is now achieving a remarkable economic development as a growth center of the world. On the other hand, Japan's ASEAN business is at a turning point as the needs of ASEAN countries are changing and competition with other countries are intensifying. While keen to achieve further economic growth, ASEAN countries are also pressed to address social problems that economic development entailed, such as serious traffic congestion in big cities and economic gap among regions. Solving these problems through innovation and contribute to sustainable new growth. Perhaps this can be a clue for Japanese businesses in thinking about next ASEAN business as I see it. Based on these recognitions, recently Japan-ASEAN Industrial Cooperation is moving to a new stage. Last year, despite the pandemic, Japan and ASEAN affirmed partnership early on and took concrete actions. I myself proactively had dialogue with economic ministers of the region, and one of the outcomes delivered was Japan-ASEAN Economic Resilience Action Plan in last August. Looking over post-pandemic era, we brought in many ideas, and more than 50 cooperation projects were incorporated into the action plan, symbolic project of which is Asian DX, digital transformation. In ASEAN, digital innovation is expanding at a rate faster than that of Japan and accelerating even under the pandemic. ASEAN can do a great deal drawing from local dynamism and can offer solutions to the problem, taking advantage of technology and expertise of Japanese companies. Public and private combined, Japan will promote strongly the innovation co-creation based on Japan-ASEAN partnership. In addition, another important keyword for Japan-ASEAN cooperation under post-corona era is making green growth happen. Countries around the world are asked to top up or accelerate the greenhouse gas emission reduction target in view of the COP26 coming up at the end of this year. Also in international finance, trend of divestment in fossil fuel projects especially is progressing rapidly. However, industrial and social structures and geographical conditions are varied from country to country. That there is no such thing as the one and only optimum solution for achieving carbon neutral. Especially in Asia, where energy demand is growing, it's essential to have diverse and realistic energy transition using all fuels and technology. For that, Japan will introduce a new Asia Energy Transition Initiative, or AETI, toward the simultaneous achievement of sustainable economic growth and carbon neutrality in Asia. This initiative will undertake to work on supporting drawing up a roadmap of energy transition, proposing and diffusing Asian version of transition financing thought, providing $10 billion financing support to projects on renewables, energy efficiency, and LNG, supporting technical development and demonstration program utilizing the fruits of 2 trillion yen fund, sharing knowledge through HRD for decarbonization technology and Asia CCUS network. Going ahead by deepening dialogue with ASEAN countries that thought on the need for This realistic transition will be spread to international community, such as the other Asian countries, US, Canada, Australia, and Middle Eastern countries. ASEAN is at a great turning point. This is a good opportunity for Japanese companies to transition who do businesses in ASEAN. Being sensitive to various changes taking place in ASEAN, taking these changes as growth opportunities and challenge fiercely the building of new business model to win the fierce competition. We hope we can share this awareness, especially with the management of the Japanese businesses. The government will, of course, support these businesses' challenges to the maximum extent. I conclude by wishing that the Japan ASEAN Business Week will be a good opportunity for everyone to think about the next ASEAN rollout. I'm also looking forward to hearing from speakers from Japan ASEAN industry, learned people, government for their insights. Thank you.
Minister Kajiyama, thank you very much.
Speaker is Secretary of General of ASEAN, Lim Jok Hoi. Thank you for joining us. It's an honor to have you. Your Excellency, please proceed.
His Excellency Hiroshi Kajiyama, Ministers of International Economy, Trade, Industry of Japan. Mr. Akio Mimura, Chairman of Japan Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Nobuhito Sasaki, Chairman and CEO of JETRO. Our colleagues from business community, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, konnichiwa. I would like to begin by sending my good wishes to all of you and thank the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, Kaidindran, Japan Chambers of Commerce and Industry for hosting the ASEAN-Japan Business Week and for inviting me to speak before all of you today. It is indeed my pleasure to join you in this very important event. I'm always enthusiastic about engaging the private sector since they are the key implementers and beneficiaries of all agreements and initiatives under the ASEAN Economic Community. This is why collaboration with the private sector holds key to greater and more sustainable progress of the AEC, especially to recover from COVID-19 pandemic. I believe all of us agree that digitalization and sustainability will be critical to our recovery efforts in the next phase of economic integration. In fact, the recently launched midterm review report of the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025 highlights the need for ASEAN to embrace and adapt a new development and trends, which include digitalization and sustainability. Moreover, these two areas also become the strategic thrust for ASEAN to develop its 13 priority economic deliverables under the Brunei chairmanships this year. With respect to digitalization, ASEAN has put forward a strong digital agenda through the ASEAN Digital Master Plan 2025 and the ASEAN Digital Integration Framework Action Plan 2025. Both initiatives are developed with a view to building a secure and open high-quality digital infrastructure, developing digital skills, and formulating a digital policy and regulation in the region. On sustainability and green growth, I'm pleased to inform you that ASEAN, under the finance and central bank process, have been continuously working on initiatives and promoting sustainable finance as shown in the previous adoption of the ASEAN Green Social Sustainability Bond Standards, as well as a roadmap for sustainable capital market and the report of promotion of sustainable finance in ASEAN. Furthermore, a more cohesive sustainable finance agenda that cut across capital market, banking, and insurance have been recently launched to develop the ASEAN taxonomy for sustainable finance. This initiative will be an overarching guide for all ASEAN member states that will also complement their respective national sustainability initiative and will serve as ASEAN common language for sustainable finance. But to be successful, our effort need to be supported by everyone, and I don't think ASEAN's government can do it alone. Instead, we need the support of the various stakeholders in the region, particularly our business community. First, we need the Japanese business to support business continuity by maximizing cross-border productive activities, as well as to take advantage supply chain reallocation to ASEAN. These are needed to restore consumer confidence and maintain market stability in the region. Second, we need the business community to assist in restoring supply chain and trade connectivity by leveraging on digital technology. One possibility is for the companies to invest more on e-commerce platform to enable fast and secure cross-border movement of goods and services to help the economic recovery and job creation after the pandemic. Finally, we need the private sector, especially business people, to also focus on sustainable investment such as green infrastructure and other low carbon investment that have high multipliers and other attractive co-benefit. To do this, it will be critical to get the investment decision right from strengthening public and private finance, focus on green growth, and mobilizing all available form of financing tools for the sustainable future of ASEAN region. In closing, let me take this opportunity again to thank METI, Kendendran, JCCI for convening this event. I strongly believe that the emphasis on digitalization and green growth will bring about tremendous growth opportunity for businesses in the region through green innovation and digital enabled innovative value creation. I would like to thank you very much, and arigato gozaimasu. I wish the event a great success. Thank you.
Your Excellency, thank you.
Now, we are pleased to have 3 distinguished business leaders to speak about new business opportunities in Southeast Asia. The first speaker is Mr. Sasaki Nobuhiko, Chairman and CEO of Japan External Trade Organization, JETRO. Mr. Sasaki, please. Mr. Kazuyama Hiroshi, Minister of Economy, Trade and Industry, Mr. Lim Jok-hoi, Secretary General of ASEAN, Mr. Mimura Kyo, Chairman of the JCCI, Mr. Hara Noriyuki, Chairman of the Committee on Asia and Oceania of Keidanren, Mr. Tamura Akihiko, Director General for Trade Policy of METI, and distinguished speakers and ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. I am Sasaki, Chairman and CEO of JETRO. I would like to offer my warmest congratulations on the opening of ASEAN-Japan Business Week. I am extremely honored to speak to you today. Our business activity in Southeast Asia spreads over half a century. During this period, Japanese companies supported the development of countries in the region centering around the manufacturing industry. We built a partnership towards industrial development. While Japanese companies created jobs, transferred technology, and nurtured human development, human resources, the governments of Southeast Asia listened to challenges faced by businesses and promoted improvement of business environment. Consequently, we were able to deepen mutual trust and have developed and kept favorable business relationship. While ASEAN consists of countries with different size, language, and ethnicity, and so forth, they have a similar industrial structure that compete with each other. Yet this region has been united in promoting free trade in stages to realize RCEP, which is a mega FTA covering the East Asia. And this represents a spirit of competitors sharing economic benefit. For that, I would like to genuinely pay my respect. And through such effort has led to growing recognition of ASEAN as a hub of global supply chain. Southeast Asia is growing in phases, aiming to join the rank of high economic income countries, transforming into a region that attracts global attention. Investment the region has garnered from the world increased fivefold over 20 years. Investments coming into not only manufacturing but also a wide-ranging area, including finance, retail, real estate. Industrial shift toward a non-manufacturing sector due to economic growth unleashed pent-up demand in each country. Further, service industry thrives by solving problems and wishes of people's lives. And now, increasingly, with digital solutions which can address these needs across countries, the youth, particularly in Southeast Asia, is taking advantage of this trend flexibly at an accelerating pace. In Southeast Asia, we have seen staggering growth of promising startups such as Grab, which will appear later in the program. They tackle social problems and needs that each country faces by adding locally pre-existing services as added value. We can learn a lot from their agile and flexible adaptive ability. It's been a year since the occurrence of COVID-19, and this infectious disease is life-threatening disease for anyone, anywhere, regardless of country, age, or sex. As such, it restricted movement of people and goods, affected economic activity. It is indeed a troubling issue. But there is a bright side, too. In these difficult times, we see new business emerging. In Southeast Asia, in addition to production, engineering, inventory management, distribution, logistics, there is a progress in telemedicine, edutech, blockchain, e-payment, and so forth. In addition, conventional industries like agriculture and fisheries are taking up digital technology more and more, generating new business opportunities. Also, some of our partners refuse to be cooped up in their domestic markets, and they are willing to join hands with us in China and other third countries. And ASEAN has launched ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework from COVID-19. And the strategies include not only enhancing healthcare systems, strengthening human security, and also promoting economic integration further, accelerating inclusive digital transformation, and advancing towards a more sustainable and resilient future. In order to contribute to this initiative, last year, Mr. Kajiyama and relevant economic ministers agreed on the industrial resilience increase, and we launched J-Bridge as a platform to increase business opportunity among companies in order to contribute. Through this initiative, we hope that Japanese companies and ASEAN startups will cooperate and create new business opportunities from new perspectives and to develop into win-win relationship. And we would like to continue to support such endeavor. This week's event, keyword is innovation and sustainability. We are going to listen to this discussion among experts, and we are going to hear concrete initiatives by Keidanren and JCCI for Southeast business. Jetro will share with you what local business communities are expecting of Japanese companies in the latest trends. And I hope that this forum will be an opportunity to consider future business in ASEAN and lead to further business development. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Sasaki. Now, at this point in time, I would like to invite Mr. Mimura Akio, Chairman of JCCI. Thank you for the kind introduction. I am Mimura, Chairman of the Japan Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I would like to offer my warmest congratulations on the opening of ASEAN-Japan Business Week focusing on Southeast Asia. COVID-19, which has spread throughout the world since the beginning of last year, is still raging. Many countries in Southeast Asia keep strict movement restriction in place, and are slow in vaccination. In Japan, too, many SMEs are facing extremely dire situations. But it is in such a crisis that companies are tested for their ability to change. While many companies are struggling to continue business and maintain jobs, they are boldly trying to change business models, increase productivity through digitization, promote business succession, and so forth simultaneously. I hope companies, particularly SMEs, will focus on more overseas business development as part of transformation. A major problem for many of Japanese SMEs is that they have stayed in domestic market primarily, and exports account only for 3 or 4% in their sales revenues, thus missing out an opportunity to capitalize on dynamism of Asian market to date. As domestic demand is not expected to grow further, I hope that they would turn their eye to overseas markets, particularly Southeast Asia closer to Japan. For that to happen, business owners themselves need to be motivated to do so. But on the other hand, it is also true that they lack in know-how and talents for doing business overseas, which is a weakness unique to SMEs. On this matter, I strongly encourage them to leverage information and support provided by the relevant bodies, including chambers of commerce and industry. The subtitle of the ASEAN-Japan Business Week is toward innovative and sustainable growth. I hope this event will offer an opportunity to Japanese businesses to become heart-to-heart partner on equal footing for Southeast Asia, which is expected to grow even faster in the future, and give them a stepping stone to turn various business opportunities into sustainable growth. For daily life of Japanese people, Southeast Asia has become so close to us. For example, Thai and Vietnamese foods are very popular in Japan, and many fruits, including banana, pineapple, and mango, are imported from Southeast Asia. Also, garments are produced in and exported from Vietnam and Cambodia, and automobiles, home appliances, and other daily necessities are from Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and the Philippines. When it comes to energy supplies such as crude oil and natural gas, Indonesia and Brunei are important for Japan, and in recent years, Japanese companies are conducting hydrogen supply chain demonstrations locally. In Southeast Asia, as many as 13,000 Japanese businesses are operating. They include SMEs that support supply chains in wide-ranging sectors such as automobile, electric devices, medical equipment, apparel, food and beverage production, and so forth. More recently, ASEAN is increasingly appreciated in the context of China Plus One strategy. There are also many Japanese companies which serve local consumers, such as ramen noodle and sushi restaurants, and convenience stores, retailers, and other service providers. In Japan, during the pandemic, food service industry has become more active in delivery service. There is a young Japanese entrepreneur in Vietnam who is trying to establish unique food delivery service. Initially, this person launched online video service that introduced restaurants, but the business was hit by the pandemic. But rather than giving up, this entrepreneur then developed a unique delivery service in multiple languages, thus differentiating from similar pre-existing services. Gradually, word of mouth spread and users increased. There is a bright outlook for the growth. There are chambers of commerce and industry organized by local Japanese companies in each country. They provide members with information and advice regarding frequently changing laws, regulations, and tax system, and host networking events, including parties and sports events. Thus, they provide wide-ranging support to help newly entering Japanese companies to start business smoothly. JCCI considers Southeast Asia as growth frontier for Japanese SMEs. Since 2013, when I became JCCI's chairman, we sent business delegations to Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Myanmar. This fiscal year, we launched new project Overseas Business Development Initiative. In collaboration with relevant organizations such as our local chambers throughout Japan, JETRO, and JICA, we will actively support overseas business operation of member companies, particularly SMEs. I recommend them to use the consultation desks of these organizations, which are located throughout Japan. Now, for the next 5 days, we will have keynote speeches and panel discussions on diverse topics. JCCI will host a session titled Growing Opportunity for SMEs in ASEAN region starting at 2 p.m. tomorrow. We will hear from SMEs currently operating in Southeast Asia and experts their views regarding business opportunities in Southeast Asia and to seize to do a successful business. I hope you'll attend the session and get ideas for your own success. In closing, it is my sincere hope that ASEAN-Japan Business Week will help Japanese companies recover from the pandemic and go on an offensive to advance to a next stage. Thank you very much for your attention. Mr. Mimura, thank you very much. Next speaker is Mr. Hara Noriyuki, Chair of the Committee on Asia and Oceania of Keidan-Ren, Representative Director, Chairman of the Board of Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance.
I am Hara, Chair of Committee on Asia and Oceania, Keidan-Ren, and the Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance Group. It's an honor for me to speak at this august occasion. The world indeed changed strikingly over the past 1 year. With the pandemic, the importance of digitalization is recognized once again, and its use is growing. Mindset and lifestyles of people changed greatly. Also, notion that mankind's development per se is jeopardizing the sustainability of the planet is spreading. In view of the new post-pandemic era, what we must do is to promote DX, digital transformation, and global economic recovery, as well as solving global agenda at the same time, and aim to realize sustainable society. With this awareness, Keidan-Ren published New Growth Strategy last November. Through realizing Society 5.0 for SDGs, aiming to solve social problems and achieve growth at the same time by using latest digital technology, this strategy appeals the importance of establishing sustainable capitalism. The key is for firms to work together with diverse entities to create new value, that is, value co-creation, especially to solve global problems and to achieve growth. Value co-creation with the international community is essential. Especially the relationship with ASEAN is extremely important. Since the mid-1980s, Japanese businesses' investment into ASEAN took off in full scale, and currently ASEAN occupies an important position as a source of international competitiveness, being a core overseas production base for Japanese manufacturers as well as for non-manufacturers in logistics, finance, and insurance. For Japanese companies, ASEAN is an inseparable partner linked with a strong bond. At this turning point of an era, co-creation of Japan and ASEAN has become even more important for the mutual development. Going forward, the following three areas will be important for co-creation with ASEAN. First is to strengthen ASEAN connectivity that Japanese companies have long been engaged in. As diverse ASEAN countries work toward development and growth with their own economic policies, cooperation serving the specific need of each country is necessary. Japanese companies would like to capitalize on its outstanding technology and continue contributing to the both hard infrastructure of road, ports, and electricity, as well as soft infrastructure of digitalization of logistics. Second is a social development of deployment of digital technology. Japan and ASEAN uphold the common goal of DX promotion. There are many opportunities to cooperate in solving social problems and realizing growth using digital technology. Cooperation with early ASEAN startups is effective as well. Third is responding to sustainable growth. Global agendas such as climate change and environment require international cooperation. For example, diffusion of excellent environmental technology helpful for decarbonization and efforts toward disaster prevention and reduction, etc., are some of the many areas that Japanese companies can contribute to ASEAN. Also, as a foundation to promote these efforts, Japan and ASEAN should work together on maintaining and strengthening free trade and investment system, which are crucial for smooth promotion of business activities. Over a long number of years, Japanese companies had built a trusting relationship with ASEAN countries through business activities. These ties are precious assets based on which Japan-ASEAN relations can be developed further. Our company, Mitsui Sumitomo Insurance, went to operate in Thailand back in 1934 for the first time, and since we have a system to underwrite insurance in all of ASEAN 10 countries. By supporting active investment of Japanese companies and local businesses as well as people's lives, and we grew together with a regional development. As the largest non-life insurance group in ASEAN, we will use our technology expertise and ideas to solve social problems and promote value creating values common to society, thereby contributing to the further regional development. Lastly, further deepening and growth of ASEAN as a community will lead to the development of the Asian region as a whole and eventually to that of the global economy. Japan-ASEAN can take advantage of mutual strength and cooperate. This will enlarge business opportunities for both of us. Day1 will be proactive in deepening relations with ASEAN. Wishing that the ASEAN Business Week 2 mark a new starting point for strengthening Japan-ASEAN relations further, I would like to close my remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hara. The last speaker in this session is Mr. Tamura Akihiko, METI's Director General for Trade Policy. He is going to speak about deepening Japanese engagement with the ASEAN region in the post-COVID-19 era. Mr. Tamura, please.
はい、皆さんこんにちは。経済産業省の
Hello, I am Tamura of METI. First, I thank organizations and speakers from both Japan and ASEAN who had cooperated in holding Japan-ASEAN Business Week. I also thank those joining us on the webinar as well. Allow me to speak on deepening Japan-ASEAN cooperation in post-pandemic era, going along with the handout. Let me talk about the hitherto Japan-ASEAN economic relationship. Japan and ASEAN have developed together over half a century, deepening its economic relations. Going back the past immediate 30 years, during the 1990s, Japan positioned ASEAN as an important manufacturing base and provided various assistances on HRD, ancillary industry cooperation to flying geese pattern development. And during which time Japanese companies went to operate in ASEAN, and on and after 2000, against the background of ASEAN seeking to achieve regional economic integration, EPA negotiation gathered force. Japan, in the meantime, concluded a bilateral agreement with ASEAN countries and put into force ASEP agreement with ASEAN as a whole. And further, last year, in the 2000, after 8 years negotiation, signed RCEP last year. And concurrently, in parallel, supply chain of Japanese companies broadened to cover ASEAN in terms of plane, and local content ratio went up accordingly. So indeed, Japan and ASEAN had established win-win relationship. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the changes occurring in ASEAN. ASEAN's economic growth is remarkable, and its appeal as a marketplace is growing. But on the other hand, various changes are occurring in ASEAN as well. Because the pandemic is still spreading in ASEAN, controlling the infection and achieving early economic recovery are urgent tasks. Also, various changes are occurring in economy and society because of the economic development underway. For 10 to 30 years, size of ASEAN economy is set to rise to number 4 in the world. But for its growth to be sustainable and for attractive market to Japanese companies, still there are many problems that are ways to be solved. Japan is one step ahead of ASEAN in experience and economic sophistication, taking advantage of Japan's expertise and technology. Perhaps we can work together with ASEAN to find solutions for those problems. I will be touching upon later that trust that ASEAN countries have on Japan is very high. So we have an advantageous position as Japan to expand further our businesses in ASEAN. There are many social problems occurring. One is the inequality issue. Many ASEAN countries are faced with regional disparity, symbolized by urban versus rural issue. For example, in Indonesia, economic gap between the rich and poor is said to be widening at the fastest pace in East Asia. It may run a risk of destabilizing politics and society. Also, there is a disparity amongst the ASEAN members as well. CLM, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, these countries continue to rely heavily on primary industries, and many of them are borne by smallholder farms and the poor. That is a reality. And in Cambodia, addressing these issues, Japanese companies are using AI to grasp and explain and diagnose a cropping situation of agricultural goods, contributing to the productivity enhancement and income increase. Next is the social and institutional infrastructure requirement. Changes are occurring rapidly in urbanization, demography, and lifestyles. New issues are coming to the fore, such as traffic congestion, environmental pollution, and the shortage of healthcare workers, for example. To address these issues, the social infrastructure needs to be developed. For example, online health care using the drone for infrastructure inspection. Digital solutions are introduced by businesses in many of the countries, and many governments are showing high interest. There are concrete examples of Japanese companies working with local partners for problem solving, such as location information of buses, which run regularly, as well as disease risk prediction. So Japanese companies are partnering up with local companies to work on this new area. So changes occur in ASEAN, and economic digitalization, climate change, all these global issues also need to be addressed. The ASEAN member countries have a high growth in digitalization. It can be said as a leapfrogging. And there are many emerging companies working very actively, having the valuation of 10 billion yen. More than 50 of them have a higher valuation than 10 billion yen. The hot news topic we are familiar with is recent Grab's SPAC listing at US NASDAQ. Highest valuation ever in history, and merger of Gojek with Tokopedia, leading EC company in Indonesia, fresh in our memory. Seen in EC, leading company like Shopee and Lazada are also a part of Chinese companies group such as Tencent and Alibaba. So in DX in ASEAN, the presence of companies from Europe, US, and China are increasing rapidly. Also, on climate changes globally, the gear is switched to going green. ASEAN, who grew with a global economy link, will be exposed to this wave, of course. As seen in Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam, formulating strategy and plan, awareness for going green is growing. How to realize economic growth and climate action at the same time will be a crucial issue for ASEAN going ahead. Next is the future cooperation between Japan and ASEAN. As said, ASEAN situation is changing rapidly. And Japan also have to stake its survival and change businesses and trade policies vis-a-vis ASEAN. There is no time to wait, given the rapid progress of thriving digitalization. As I said to you briefly, according to Singapore think tank's survey, among major countries, the country most trusted by ASEAN is Japan. So based on the trust and cooperative relationship built over the years, our relations can be deepened further and lifted to higher ground. This can be a golden opportunity. Thinking about new Japan-ASEAN relationship post-corona era, there are three important pillars. First is, of course, strengthening cooperation toward early recovery from the pandemic. And second is the transform to a lucrative business model. Production represented by Japan's manufacturing first developed chronologically based on its own and the affiliate companies' project, invested overseas and developed infrastructure there and expanded the production network, thereby achieving overall cost reduction and production and productivity gain. However, good product will sell era is almost gone. To conduct global business, responding to local needs and switching business model may be in order. Concretely, combination of goods with services and solution proposition type of businesses need to be cultivated further. Also, in so doing, co-creating business with local partners in ASEAN on more equal footing and use open innovation may be necessary. Third is energy transition and partnership on green growth. As I said to you before, economic growth and climate action should go hand in hand simultaneously in ASEAN. This is crucial for ASEAN, and Japan would like to join force with ASEAN to work on it. And lastly, let's skip that. Let me introduce to you what METI has been doing. Based on the 3 pillars, METI have been working on many fronts since the outbreak of the COVID. So let me introduce them to you. First is Japan-ASEAN Economic Resilience Action Plan. After the outbreak, temporarily, there was a time when there was an increasing export restrictive measures taken by many countries working against international cooperation. So responding to this, Japan and ASEAN put together an action plan comprising more than 50 projects to preserve and strengthen cooperation responding to the hitherto cooperation on current crisis responses, and future cooperation, and have advanced that. Next, secondly, the highlight of the action plan is Asia DX project. This supports open innovation projects between Japanese companies and ASEAN companies. The requirement is to use digital technology to help solve ASEAN's social problems. I introduced you about the agriculture project underway in Cambodia, or healthcare medical project in Thailand, and mobility project in Malaysia. So far, 23 projects in 9 different countries have been adopted. Next is DISG, Dialogue on Innovative and Sustainable Growth. We formed a venue for dialogue amongst wide-ranging people to discuss how to strengthen growth potential and achieve sustainable economic growth using innovation. Multiple themes have been set around which people from industry, academia are getting together and taking part in a series of webinars. Since last October, under these themes, about 5 times webinars have been held. And starting from today, for a few-day period, Japan-ASEAN Business Week will be held. And this is also a part of this endeavor. Also, I told you about Japan-ASEAN Economic Resilience Action Plan. Based on that, resilient supply chain need to be considered ever more, not only within ASEAN, but more widely on the regional basis. We are supporting sophistication of production and logistics using digital technology. And from the mid to long term, together with Australia and India, Japan is discussing with ASEAN supply chain resilience initiative. And under JETRO, many of the dialogue have been going on. Lastly, as Minister Kajiyama had mentioned, I'd like to refer to the Asia Energy Transition Initiative. Asia Energy Transition Initiative, AETI for short, 80 for short. As energy demand is likely to continue to rise in Asia to achieve sustainable growth and carbon neutrality, diverse, realistic energy transition using all technology and fuels are essential. So Japanese government will support ASEAN countries' work on transition. That's it from me. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tamura. This concludes Japan ASEAN Business Week opening session, establishing new partnership between Japan and Southeast Asia. Thank you for listening. The next session is Transforming Southeast Asia, Transforming Japanese Businesses. This will start at 1600, 4 p.m. Japan time. Please wait until then. Thank you.
お時間となりましたので、
We would now like to resume ASEAN-Japan Business Week for Innovative and Sustainable Growth, Day 1. From this session onward, for the next 5 days, I will be your MC. I am Tada Kaltira Ayumi, AMEC Secretariat PR Manager. I ask for your kind cooperation for the next 5 days. The next session is about transforming Southeast Asia, transforming Japanese business. The session will be moderated by Mr. Kobayashi Hirokazu, Chair of AMEC Dialogue for Innovative and Sustainable Growth Task Force. I hand over to you, Mr. Kobayashi.
皆さんこんにちは。
Hello everyone, as introduced, I am Kobayashi. We have 2 hours ahead together with you, and I have the honor of being a moderator. I solicit your cooperation. So I am from Singapore today. Based on Singapore, under the economic cooperation of ASEAN 10 plus Japan framework, I have been involved in dialogue and the cooperation, and that is why I have been given the honor of serving as moderator for you today. So first of all, at this session, we would like to achieve the following. Please show the slide. At this slide, at this session, we are going to have a 5-day session, and we are going to show an overview from this session so that we can go into more detail in the subsequent sessions. So first of all, digital transformation underway in ASEAN, and startups activities will be the highlight at our session. So first of all, new era is emerging in Southeast Asia, and the leapfrog have been experienced. And super app, unicorn, Grab is our speaker. And Mr. Shonhen is with us today. Privileged to have him today. And we also have a venture capitalist, Mr. Ebihara, who is going to talk to us about the DX status led by the company. And next, new businesses. What the Japanese companies have been doing. 2 presenters are waiting. Mr. Saito from MBK. He is originally from Mitsui. And as a core of healthcare businesses, there is a IHH, which is the largest hospital group in Asia, and related business will be presented. And also Kawabata Steel, Mr. Kawabata will be the speaker to talk to us about the perspective of a mid-sized company. What are the challenges, what they are doing in terms of HRD and so forth. And last speaker is from policy think tank area, representative think tank in Asia, Mr. Hachiyama. Going beyond the corona period, what is the potential held by ASEAN? What are the issues as well as potential? We are going to cover those areas during the next 2-hour session. So without any ado, let's hear from our speakers. First speaker is from representative startup in Southeast Asia, Grab. Mr. Sean Hen is with us today, talking about the future market of 600 million people. So Grab case will be presented to us.
Your very busy schedule. I'd like you to make a keynote presentation first before we move on to the Q&A session. Mr. Sean, please, the floor is yours.
Kobayashi-san, thank you so much for having me. I will be sharing my screen now. Thank you. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me to be an esteemed guest here. It's a real pleasure to be able to share a little bit about what we have been doing here at Grab, and it's truly a privilege that you will be giving me your attention for the next 15 minutes. Now, as we begin this session, I want to take a few minutes just to share a little bit about myself. as a quick introduction, I joined Grab in 2016, and I helped originally to build up the regional business development function here at Grab. And I also had the opportunity during my years here to also now own one of our business verticals, which is our first B2B business called Grab for Business, right? And I've had the enormous opportunity to actually benefit by observing how our business has grown from not just a ride-hailing business, but also one that has emerged into a super app today here in Southeast Asia. So today, what I'll be sharing with you is about who Grab is, what our vision and goals are that embody what we do here in this region, and the impact that we have as a result of pursuing that mission. Now, a little bit about Grab and our platform, right? We were founded in 2012, and we now serve approximately 25 million monthly users across all 8 countries in the region. Up until 2018, as I mentioned previously, we were just essentially a ride-hailing business, right? And as we evolved, we continued to analyze the needs of our consumers here in Southeast Asia, and also thought about what were some of the key services that our customers and consumers desire that were complementary to our platform. This, as a result, has resulted in tremendous transformation of our business over the years to also include other core businesses, like deliveries for food and groceries and e-commerce, which also now account for almost half of our business today. Whilst we have grown our core service offerings, we continue to experiment and test new ideas, as you can see on this page, as evidenced by how we also explore other opportunities like hotel bookings and telehealth, which we have launched with select strategic partners of ours. As our services actually grew, right, we also observed that there was an opportunity to also digitize payments in Southeast Asia, which is why we designed our own wallet to duplicate all of these transactions in our ecosystem. Whilst that wallet had initially started as a closed-loop wallet with that intent, it has very quickly evolved into one that has become open-loop, so much so that you can make purchases offline at the store and in other online stores as well. And all of this has actually formed the foundation for us to subsequently grow our financial offering to now include insurance, loans, and even investments. This broad diversification of our offerings beyond what we started out with back in 2012, which was just ride-hailing, has actually allowed us to become the leading super app here in Southeast Asia. And with all of that information in mind that I just shared, right? Here's an example of how Grab's ecosystem of services is brought to life in a consumer's everyday life to meet all of their needs. Whether it's grabbing a meal with friends, traveling from one place to another, getting goods delivered to their home, or making payments for their purchases online and offline, they can all be carried out within one Grab app. And this image here is exactly the example of how the consumer might actually behave from the time they wake up in the morning till they go to sleep at night. Now, our vision centers on 3 core pillars, but all of that is centered on one very strong high-level vision, which is tech for good. We create technologies that are meant to enable the ecosystem in Southeast Asia. And the 3 pillars and vectors that we call them that guide our decision-making every single day include the desire to improve digital inclusion and literacy throughout the economies, empower micro-entrepreneurs and small businesses throughout Southeast Asia. And the third is to actually build future-ready workforces here in Southeast Asia to prepare them for the digital age. And if we look a little bit more at the potential impact, right? So we've already started to make that impact in Southeast Asia over the last 8 to 9 years, right? Using that philosophy of the 3 pillars and the desire to want to build tech for good, we have always used that philosophy in mind to always maintain what we call a double bottom line Grab. But we believe that, we have to have not just generate revenue as a company, but also enable the ecosystem and the people that we work with, from the merchants, to drivers, to the consumers. And we still are only at the beginning of that journey, and we have a long way ahead for us to go. Now, if we look at Southeast Asia alone, in 2020, we had 40 million new users come online in Southeast Asia. If we just look at digital financial services alone, which is still a very young industry here, that growth of users coming online is indicative of the significant opportunity to drive our digital inclusion and literacy goals around financial services, right? If we look a little bit deeper, right, approximately 6 in 10 people in Southeast Asia are considered to be unbanked or underbanked, which means they have unmet needs such as being underinsured or simply not having access to long-term savings products, which is like the most basic of all digital financial services capabilities. So we have a long, long way to go. Now, to further reinforce that point that I just made, right? The region and its users coming online are evolving very, very fast, very rapidly. And a lot of these users are actually starting to adopt these services very, very quickly. And they will continue to behave that way as the economy starts to digitalize a lot more. Online food delivery penetration, for instance, has already reached 11% of all consumer food orders in Southeast Asia. And this is inclusive of both dine-ins and takeaways, right? So 11%. Digital financial services penetration has shown good traction amongst the banking population, and we can actually expect this segment to grow even more as we bring online all of those unbanked and underbanked individuals as well. Now, if you look at these two charts, what's glaringly obvious, however, is the fact that compared to more mature markets like China and the United States, Southeast Asia is still in the very, very, very early stages of online disruption, right? So the potential here is actually very, very big. And Grab actually aims to continue to help lead the way in the digitization of the region. Now, to share with you a few examples, and one in particular that we cannot ignore, right, in this region is, and in this time, right, we actually need to think about this in a slightly different way. So let's shift gears, right, to acknowledge the current global pandemic and Grab's focus areas as a result of these unprecedented times, right? COVID remains a challenge. All of us know that across the region, across the globe, right? And we will continue to have a major, and it will continue to have major and lasting impact in Southeast Asia. Now, this pandemic has created an unequal crisis between those who are working online seamlessly and those who still to this day struggle to participate in the digital world. Countries, companies, consumers have all been forced to adapt to this new normal. For Grab, we've been able to use our digital platform to support communities and help people to overcome these social challenges. In these difficult times, we continue to remain committed to 3 very broad initiatives. One is ensuring that our stakeholders continue to have access to income opportunities. For example, even though our transport ride-hailing business took a huge hit during the COVID pandemic period last year, and a lot of our drivers found themselves with reduced number of rides and volume, we very quickly switched gears for them to actually onboard over 100,000 of them to actually be able to do deliveries, right? The second is actually providing services that meet with safety and healthcare needs. We launched a couple of very interesting products, where one of which is we wanted to provide our consumers to actually feel safe. So we launched something called Grab Protect, which allowed them to feel safer in getting into cars again for ride-hailing purposes. We introduced a product called Grab Care. And basically, what Grab Care is a 24/7 fixed fare, dedicated service only for healthcare staff. And we launched it specifically during the COVID period just for them, right? The third broad initiative that we're working on is actually working with partners to create solutions that overcome all kinds of challenges. For example, in Indonesia, our Indonesia leadership team and the operations team on the ground, as you can see from this picture, are working very, very closely with the Indonesian government to actually enable a lot of the Indonesia vaccination centers. And we've actually, despite all of this and situations and difficulties and challenges in 2020, we have made a lot of progress. But yet at the same time, it's also made us realize that we still have so much more to do, right? COVID is really a very long battle, and we have to be able to face it together. And we must be prepared that new challenges that we can't predict today are still going to emerge across the region. And therefore, for Grab, we want to continue to be able to play a role in this space. Now, I want to share something a little bit more lighthearted, right? So even during difficult times, this is a large part of our mission, enabling, right? There's enabling people, enabling small businesses in Southeast Asia, just exactly like what this image here represents, right? A silver lining is that because of this pandemic, we have all the more been able to continue to use our technology capabilities to help micro SMEs, as we call them, to come online. Approximately 34% of micro SMEs across Southeast Asia have zero online or e-commerce presence before the COVID period. And some examples of this would include, for example, wet markets, street food vendors, the mom and pop stalls, right? The ones in Indonesia, for example, that we call, in warungs, and in Philippines, what we call sari-sari stalls, right? They were never online before COVID, right? And a lot of these small businesses, micro businesses, actually are essential to daily lives for a lot of consumers in Southeast Asia. And worst of all is that because of COVID, they're the ones who have been hardest hit and actually are struggling the most. So if I bring your attention back to this image, who you see here is a very lovely lady. And trust me, she exists. She's a real person, right? This is not someone I made up, right? So her name is Rosdiana, right? So Rosdiana is 60 years old. She's a merchant that works in a very traditional wet market setting in Medan, North Sumatra in Indonesia, right? And she's been selling fresh produce in this wet market for the last 30 years, right? And when the pandemic hit, we quoted her here, she actually said, when the pandemic came, lots of my customers were texting me and asking if I can deliver the fruits, fish, and vegetables to their house. But I said it's impossible as it would take a lot of time just to deliver orders. I understand that I need to adapt or see my lifelong business being threatened, right? So she's not the only one who faced challenges like this. So what did we do, right? We went out there to help individuals and small micro businesses like Rosdiana to help them establish an online presence on one of our business verticals today called GrabMart, right? We onboarded her with digital payments, and we brought her into our ecosystem so that consumers can basically continue to order produce from her. And we actually can then help her deliver her goods to all of her loyal customers. Right? As a result of this, she actually managed to stay afloat and even managed to hire 2 more employees. So it was very, very good news, right? And a very good example. Now, as I come to the end of my presentation before we move into Q&A, I kind of wanted to bring this topic a little bit back to ASEAN and Japan, right? And share a little bit about how Grab has been working with some of our Japanese counterparts. Now, one of the key ones that we recently launched actually is we've always believed with actually Japan Taxi, right? Because we have always believed in improving our service offerings to users in Southeast Asia through Grab. And we believe fundamentally that we cannot do it alone, right? Especially when we're talking about the global stage. So one good example is that in 2019, and actually ever since late 2019, right, Grab consumers have actually been able to access a taxi in Japan through the Grab app, right? So if I were to go to Japan today, I can actually book a taxi in the Grab app and get one. However, the car that picks you up in Japan is actually a Japan Taxi car, right? And we've been able to leverage Japan Taxi's fleet of over 70,000 cars in 5 locations in Japan across Tokyo, Kyoto, Sapporo, Nagoya, and Okinawa, right? And all of this is actually enabled together with GrabPay as well. So when travel resumes, we actually expect that we will be able to kind of pick up where we left off pre-COVID times together with Japan Taxi and be able to kind of encourage people to travel again and enable them to actually get access to some of these ride-hailing services outside of Southeast Asia. Now, the next one, of course, is with SoftBank, right? And many, many ways we work with SoftBank. Now, I'm going to share with you 2 ways that we've been working with that. The first is, together with SoftBank, we have a reseller agreement where SoftBank's enterprise division, SBKK, actually helps us to promote Grab for Business to other Japanese enterprise customers based here in Southeast Asia. And they provide us easy access to that and provide their Japanese enterprise customers with easy access to solutions here in Southeast Asia, right? The second part that we're working on with SoftBank is through a young company called Split, right? So from all the regular interactions that we had with the SoftBank team back in the day, we've identified that we had a very common interest in helping to define the future of ride-hail and mobility across the globe, not just in Japan or Southeast Asia, right? So in 2019, Grab had actually invested in this company called Split, which is actually a key connector to enabling our global partnerships like the one I just shared with you about Japan Taxi. Without Split, we would never have been able to enable the Japan Taxi partnership. Now, with the mutual interest in mind, we introduced SoftBank to Split, and SoftBank Enterprise Division eventually led the Series B for Split. And today, both of us sit on the board and work very closely with the Split team and leadership to jointly create opportunities for Japanese users and businesses, both domestically and when Japanese users and consumers actually travel abroad. And in reverse, the benefits, are also seen for the Grab users as we do the same for them as they travel to Japan, for instance, right? Now, if I have to leave you with one message, I think it's engaging with, the broader Japanese community, right? As a consumer myself, Japanese culture, food, media, products are hugely popular in Southeast Asia. Trust me, I'm a big fan, right? And Japanese companies have ventured into our region and to Southeast Asia, have actually done very well to capture the growth potential here. However, I think one thing during times like this that's unprecedented is the fact that travel no longer exists. So one challenge and one thought I will put out there is how can we actually explore greater opportunities for collaboration? Because if we can't bring the consumers to Japan during these times, then we need to think a little bit about how we can actually bring Japan to the consumers here in Southeast Asia. And for me, I think that's one interesting thought that I would like to leave you with today. So that brings me to the end of my, sorry, I didn't change the slide. That brings me to the end of my presentation. If Kobayashi-san, if you don't mind, I will stop sharing my slides now.
Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation, Mr. Sean. I believe the success story of Grab gives huge encouragement, not only to the people in ASEAN, but also to the Japanese people who wish to see further prosperity and sustainability in this region. I'd like to proceed and give you a couple of questions based on the comments we received in advance from the participants today. Mr. Sean, the first question from me is about the COVID-19 pandemic and its impact on the business environment. You touched upon the adaptation to new normal, but please let us learn more. How has COVID-19 changed the business landscape for Grab? How has your company changed since the pandemic hit the region?
Yeah. Thank you for the question, Kobayashi-san. I think it's a very important one. I know I talked about this a little bit during my presentation, but it's important that we kind of address this a little bit more. So thank you for asking that. So as I said during the presentation, COVID has hit the region very, very hard. Right? This has meant that the change of mindsets across the region had to happen overnight. Digitization was accelerated very quickly and was deemed almost necessary for any traditional offline business, as they were asked and forced, actually, not even asked, they were forced to go online. So for Grab, I think we've been doing our part to make the process of digitization for micro SMEs as smooth sailing as possible, to make it as easy for them as possible, right? So the key priorities, I think, that has changed for us in the last 12 to 15 months, right? And I alluded to this point earlier in my presentation as well, is the very first one in a period like this is actually safety, right? So safety continues to be our number one priority, right? We need to give people the courage to feel safe when they use our services, right? And when they engage with the broader economy and ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So whether it's getting cars for transport ordering groceries online or buying today's lunch through a delivery. Right? So I alluded to that example also during my session, which is Grab Protect, if you remember, right? How can we almost create health and safety standards of a new level so that consumers who actually decide to book a car will feel safe that getting into the car is safe for them, right? They have that mental assurance, right? And actually is clean, right? So the second part that's a big priority for us is interestingly, is the ability to ramp up capacity to meet demand, right? So as cities around the region started locking down, right, our demand for ride-hailing services naturally started to fall because people were not moving around as much. However, our demand for delivery started to increase exponentially. Consumers suddenly needed to have all of their daily essentials delivered, not just food. So we had to retrain more than 200,000 driver partners to meet the demand and enable them to keep earning income as well themselves. So we had to ramp up, our supply base of driver partners to actually meet all of that demand. Now, the third part that's also important for us is the ability to actually equip partners with tools and training, right? So over 500,000 merchants joined Grab's platform in 2020. And we continue to ensure that they don't just do business in the traditional context and mindset, but they also see the potential that going online can provide them with better support and better revenue growth as they think about how they engage with this next phase of how consumers behave as well, right? Now, the last point is, of course, for us, continuing to provide services that actually cater to consumer needs, right? So we rapidly, as I mentioned before, actually before the COVID period, we didn't have as broad a scale for our grocery delivery service, right? It was COVID that actually initiated the acceleration of the development of the product, where GrabMart today is available in 8 countries. We introduced also another one. I gave you the example of Grab Care before, but we've also introduced another one called Grab Assistant. So Grab Assistant is actually to enable consumers to purchase daily essentials from 37,000 wet market sellers across the region, right? And obviously very popular in countries like Thailand, as you can imagine, where people are able to get their cheap, simple, good, fresh vegetables from the wet supermarket, right? This enables them to do that. So that's a lot of the things that we are taking very differently in our mindsets and how we want to meet that demand and help the micro businesses.
Okay, Sean, thank you very much. Let me give you next question, which is actually linked to the first one. It's about digitalization and sustainability. We are now witnessing the evolutionary change by digitalization, but it is not fully certain if it would benefit everyone in the society across the region without leaving anyone behind. So my question is, what do you think needs to happen to ensure that such trend of digital transformation continues in a sustainable manner? Any expectation for other players, including governments, for example?
So thank you for the question again, Kobayashi-san. I think it's probably a very, very, very important fundamental question we need to answer. And it's not an easy one, right? It requires businesses, private sector, public sector coming together to actually enable this into the future, right? But if we take a look at digitization, right? Pre-COVID, digitization in Southeast Asia was seen as nice to have. If you were able to, you were able to do it, you'd be able to interact every day digitally through all these business offerings. But with the pandemic again, right, it's almost become a necessity, right? And consumers are now, going, they are starting to discover the convenience of online shopping, for example. Everything that they're doing, they're able to do from their home or from wherever they are by a simple tap of an application button on their phones, right? Now, these behaviors and mindsets are going to continue. Right? I think some of you may have heard of this before, this saying where it takes 21 days to build a new habit, right? And we are way past 21 days in this pandemic. All of these habits are here to stay. That behavior is here to stay. However, to a very specific point in your question is how do we do so And if we recognize this evolution is going to continue, how do we continue to feed that development and that growth without leaving anyone behind? I think that's a very, very important point you raised, right? Now, what do the private sector and public sector, what can they actually do, right? I think if we think about this, the first one is obviously education, right? We actually need to invest in education. If we equip all of these people, whether they are working in these small businesses or whether they're just consumers who didn't have enough access to digital capabilities in the past, right? Equip them with the right skills to thrive during this digital age, right? And if we were to actually look into the future, think about the skills about, what kind of skills that people young and old actually need to have to be able to survive in this environment. And I guess a very good example is what we have done with Microsoft, right? And we want to keep doing this. This is just the first of many opportunities and initiatives, right? We actually partnered Microsoft to create an upskilling and digital literacy program for Southeast Asian consumers and businesses, right? Now, we launched this program in 6 markets, and we actually had more than 250,000 delivery and driver partners that are in our ecosystem to come online and actually participate in this program, right? So today, we've had over 250,000 of them participate. And if I had to give you one very specific example without mentioning names, right? One of the participants from our driver base who took part in this program, actually his original job was as a testing inspector in the aerospace industry, right? And on the side, he was driving Grab part-time. So he participated in this program, learned about coding, and then graduated from the program. Today, he is the first person that has come out from this program who has actually gotten a job at Grab as a software engineer. So it's one way of uplifting and training and investing in education for the ecosystem and the economy, right? Now, the second is increasing access to digital opportunities, right? We cannot just focus on tier 1 cities, right? The tendency for any business is that we will always tend to be laser focused on tier 1 cities, and because it's just easy, right? But of course, once we want to improve digital access and literacy in those cities, we need to expand beyond that. We need to go to tier 2, tier 3 cities as well, right? And focus on the end users there, right? We need to empower a lot of the local communities and some of the outer skirt, communities and systems to actually bring them online in a way that's affordable and also sustainable. And I think the last one is pretty obvious. I think for companies, private companies especially, we cannot stop innovating, right? We need to keep developing hyper-local services and technology to address some of the specific needs and create new solutions, right, for small businesses and consumers, right? For example, microfinancial services, right? Some of these micro businesses have never had access to the ability to borrow money to be able to grow their business, right? Can we even provide microfinancial capabilities to them? So these are some of the ideas that we need to keep thinking about.
Thank you very much for your insight. I'm afraid we are running out of time, so let me give you our final question. For the participants here today, especially for those from Japanese business community, what is the one thing that they must take away from this session? What is your final message? Please.
Wow, thank you, Kobayashi-san. I think for me, the main thing is, when I was invited to speak here in this forum, the first thing that I thought about is, the one message I want to leave you with is how much I miss Japan. I used to travel to Japan twice a year, and I especially miss the slopes of Niseko and Hakuba because I always go snowboarding in Japan 2 times a year, right? December and February, every single year. And I almost want to say that the one message is find me a way to get back to the slopes in Japan. But to take a more serious note, right? I think if we had to go back to parts of what I shared in my presentation, I think you have to understand that the potential in Southeast Asia is only just beginning, right? We are at the cusp of that growth, right? It is starting to ramp up. And there's a lot of room for everyone to participate. As I said before in my presentation, Japanese culture, Japanese goods are tremendously popular here in Southeast Asia, right? And there's a very strong demand for Japanese products, services, and expertise. And if we look, especially in the current pandemic environment, when folks like me cannot go to Japan for 2 trips a year, right? The question then becomes is, like I said in my presentation, how can we bring Japan to the consumer? And is it time for us to actually start rethinking how we can engage global customers and consumers in a new way? And I can tell you that, I don't think the effort will be wasted. Because if Japan and Japanese companies were to think about how to engage the global economy from Japan and bringing that services out even more in a new way, right, and leverage some of these opportunities, I don't think it's going to be a wasted effort, even when borders reopen, right? Because again, like I said, I think the behaviors will continue to stick. And of course, my last point is, if any of the Japanese counterparts and companies here, if you ever think you want to expand further into Southeast Asia and you are looking for local partners, I do think that having a localized partner that understands all the different markets, there isn't one single formula for Southeast Asia, given how different every market is. If you're looking for partners, I think that's an important part of the formula. You almost need to find hyper-local partners to be able to succeed. So those, I guess, would be the last 2 key messages I'll leave you with.
Mr. Sean, thank you so much to give us very encouraging comments and to share your expectation for further engagement with Japan in the future. So we should definitely see it. So thank you again for taking the time to join us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kobayashi-san, and I hope all of you have a very wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you. さて、
Well then, let's go to the next speaker. Next speaker is from Librite Partners, Mr. Ebihara Takeshi. He has been engaged in the startup investment management company for 20 years and has been working from Singapore recently, making investment in Southeast Asia and India as well. And his theme will be the Southeast Asia DX led by startups. And there's a chat line on the YouTube where you can post your question as speakers continue to speak. So thank you for waiting. Mr. Ebihara, would you like to take the floor?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I am representative of Librite Partners. Ebihara is my name. I am also speaking from Singapore today. Here in Singapore, in Bangalore, India, and Tokyo in Japan, we have 3 locations and 3 teams in those locations. Japanese companies give us a fund to invest in startups in Southeast Asia and India. So in this sense, Japanese companies, Japanese economy, and also Asia emerging economies, particularly startups and DX, and we are engaged in the liaising among the different parties in this regard on a day-to-day basis. So I would like to give you very detailed local information which will be useful for you. Now, I would like to use some slides, so I would like to share the screen. Now, first of all, let's look at macroscopic perspective. As you can see, for the past few years, centering around Singapore, Southeast Asian countries, startups, the fundraising ecosystem has been progressing substantially. About 1 trillion yen or so investment is being made into startups in this region. Since 2018, there is a slight drop in number. Globally, I think there has been a quite excessive boom in startups. So there was a correction in 2018 or latter half of that year. Not only in ASEAN, but also in the US and China, we see the same trend of correction. However, since then, about 1 trillion yen or so investments being made. Despite the pandemic, it is growing. Particularly, as Sean explained just now, Grab, and on the left-hand side, you see Gojek and Tokopedia. These are 2 major unicorns in Indonesia which have decided to merge announcement was made some days ago. And also on the left-hand side, you can see C Group, and on the right, Bukalapak, and our company is making investment from Day1 in this company. So these are the unicorns, decacorn, and this is in the order of 1 trillion yen. So we are seeing the emergence of these startups, and they are now going public. According to some reports and announcements for the past 1 or 2 years, we have been seeing the tech IPO boom in a sense. So this shows the Singapore, for example. These are the Singapore is the ASEAN financial hub. In the past, we had a banking and the telecom companies, which are at the top of capital market cap. Since 4 years ago, C Limited was listed, and if you include that, the numbers here are a little bit outdated, but more recently, exceeding 10 trillion yen is the market cap of the company. The company is only 10 years old. However, this company has become #1 in Singapore and Southeast Asia in terms of market cap. And Grab has not gone public, but as you can see, this is the result of the company. Likewise, in Indonesia, we see some listed companies here, and just like this, Gojek and Tokopedia, the merger was announced recently, and combined market cap is on par with other listed companies. What I want to say is ASEAN's digital startup companies, among all the market listed companies, they are at the top of the ranking table. So you can see much progress in Southeast Asia. Then why is it progressing at a staggering pace? Leapfrog is the answer. So original business infrastructure, social infrastructure is lacking. Therefore, these companies can make a leapfrog. So retailers, before retailers come to their own villages or towns, they can make a leapfrog. Before credit card comes, e-payment is prevailing, as Sean mentioned earlier. Another point is young. So digital natives in their 20s and 30s are a majority of the total population. So there is a demographic feature. So these people are the ones who are using smartphones to do e-payment or internet access. So in the case of Japanese people, maybe they use PC or laptop and go on to smartphones. However, these young people in Asia have a very high familiarity of smartphone-based technology. And the entrepreneurs and the programmers are now engaged by exercising leadership in government and also legacy system. So as you know, another point is, as a result of such a trend, what happens naturally, as a fundamentals, for example, in the case of e-commerce, this shows a CAGR increase on an annual average, 1.6 times increase. The Japan, as METI, makes a white paper every year. And in the case of Japan, only single-digit growth. In the case of ASEAN, 1.5 times. And food delivery was mentioned earlier, and 2 times increase in recent years have been seen. So in this way, the market is appreciating such startups. Then let's look into more microscopic level. First of all, retail DX. And we are making investment in this company, Bukalapak, and basically it is engaged in e-commerce. The feature of the company is that the company is very strong in the second tier, third tier cities or villages where digital penetration has not been made. So remote areas in a sense. So they are strong in those areas. Then ordinary citizens do not use smartphones. They use feature phones, more or less, and therefore internet connection is not very good. So on the right-hand side, you can see Mitra This ambassador system was introduced by this company, and through this retailer, they can use the EC. They can ask the retailer staff to buy such and such, and EC is done, and they go the store to pick it up. 7 million agents are existing throughout the remote areas of India. EC is being provided. This is a retail revolution and micro business revolution. So micro SME, so very small and micro stores are being empowered. Not only buyers but also sellers' income will increase. And next is financial DX. We are making investment Philippine-based wallet company. And Gojek, Indonesian unicorn Decacon, acquired this company at the end. And the point is financial inclusivity. As you know, in the Philippines, there are many unbanked people. Many people do not have bank accounts. About 70% of the population do not have bank account. So rather than banks, but the smartphone is serving as their own bank. Because a smartphone has on the individual account number. So those who are underserved people are now receiving a service via smartphone rapidly. And now logistics DX. Gojek is one example. Gogoban, Aramove, and more than 10 billion yen market cap companies are already existing multiple numbers. Urban logistics, last mile and on-demand, and bike logistics. So the point is, supply chain revolution is occurring. So of course, players here, from the perspective of operators, these logistic players are using third-party logistics, TPL. In that case, in different sectors like medicine, agriculture, in these different sectors, the supply chain, which have been fragmented, they are being connected end to end. That is a recent trend. Another point is fintech. There's something times fintech. So B2B players, without B2B, all the B2B players are in fintech. In the case of logistics, drivers are being lent money like Grab, and such a service is penetrating very rapidly. Now, hospital DX, of course, they are seeing digitization as well. The villages where there are no doctors in ASEAN countries, such a remote telemedicine app is becoming more and more popular. For example, the surgical operation can be avoided, like COVID as well, and you can avoid people-to-people contact as well. And education, DX, and educators, we see a startup. And what is important here is there is a needs locally rooted, and they have to be captured. In the case of education, there is a high share of education expenses in the household income. So my staff also pay a lot of money to cram schools and the tutors, and which is very surprising to me. But to that extent, they are very enthusiastic about education. Therefore, the share of education expenses in GDP is very high. So the DX is being promoted here. And agriculture is another sector. Sensing technology and highly sophisticated information capturing technology use to increase yield. And also from upstream to downstream, namely farm to fork, the process is covered. And as a result, food revolution, agricultural revolution is now being unfolded. Now, lastly, let me talk about, as I said in the beginning, we are receiving money from Japanese companies to make investment in Asian startups. That is our job. And we would like to establish a bridge between these two parties in Asia and Japan. So this is only an example, not exhaustive list. This is what we help in terms of capital tie-up and acquisition, equity investment, and so forth. Briefly, I would like to give you some highlights in terms of case study, why such cases have been successful. First of all, in Singapore, the eKYC for banks, this is quite unique, using AI. And Nomura Security has made equity investment in this company. More recently, anti-money laundering and KYC is very important for that purpose, and technology is being used for this service. And to that, AI is used in order to raise efficiency for KYC. So this is a benefit, and that is why they reached agreement. This is Indian example. Murata Corporation made a investment into Vios. This is a very special medical device manufacturer. Murata actually bought this company. And Toppan Printing also made investment into Medica Bazaar. Capital tie-up was agreed. This is another example. The points of these cases are as follows. On the right-hand side, you can see 3 circles on the right. So digital transformation, so far, the competition was within the internet. However, you have to go out of internet because various sectors are going through digitization. And also, as we saw in finance example, in the remote area where IT or internet access is not that good, technology is penetrating. And also, the medical and also social benefits are being provided by these services. So I think these 3 circles are very important. This is where startups are booming and attracting a lot of investment. On the left-hand side, you can see some problems are keywords. They are fragmented, not modernized. As a result, they want to use leverage and to leapfrog. This is the market environment in Southeast Asia. So as you can see, it is very unique and is completely different from the Japan or other advanced countries in terms of market environment. Therefore, you need local experts, as I have written there. As Sean said earlier, we need local startups, maybe that can be startups, or maybe the companies like us who support startups or the government agents. So in any case, local agents have to be onboarded. Now, since the time has come, so I would like to close my presentation at this point in time.
はい、海老原
Well, thank you, Mr. Ebihara, for citing various different examples, and thank you for describing about the DX situation in ASEAN and Southeast Asia. Now let's move on to question and answers period. Well, there is a housekeeping announcement from the Secretariat. Well, participants, I told you that you can use the YouTube Live where you can post your question. But I have additional comment. So you might be using your browsers and YouTube apps. You need to refresh that. Then you'll be able to post your question. So I hope you'll be active in posting questions on the YouTube Live section. Thank you for waiting, Mr. Ebihara. We have a question for you which came in advance. Can I ask you some questions? First question about the startups in Southeast Asia. It's not about individual companies, but what do you think about the potential of an entire market and community? We learned about Grab and C, Gojek, and GoTo, unicorns. activities are remarkable nowadays, but for the past few years, so unicorn would take up most of the investment money available. So not enough to go around for someone else. But looking ahead 10 years or even further, if you look at the startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia, what do you think?
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, as you aptly mentioned, so-called unicorns. So there are some companies which are often cited as unicorn. Maybe there are less than 10 though. However, if you look at these 10 companies, they go public and they go beyond the stage of unicorn. So they leave the unicorn stage. And it is very gratifying since I have been working here for 10 years in Singapore. So they are moving into next phase. Then unicorn with market cap of 10 billion yen, there are several dozens of companies like this in this scale. Now, the progress of DX, and there is a DX penetration curve. For example, Google Temasek every year publishes a digital e-economy report. And according to this report, it is often explained that in the beginning, they focus on e-commerce for consumers like media or online travel. And because it is more amenable to DX, and the next phase is fintech, ride share like Grab, and after that comes all the sectors, the omnidirectional focus like agriculture, education, and so forth. So a lot of early stage seed investments are being done in such an area, and there are very excellent startups coming up. So in this way, there is a transfer of baton from early stage to next stage. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a second question for you about China. The impact of China, how do you assess it looking at Southeast Asian countries for the past few years or so? Alibaba and Tencent giant players come from China are making active investment. So looking at this situation, particularly focused on startup, maybe they are to be taken up by the Chinese giant, no room left for Japanese businesses to go into. What is your take?
Let me give you a conclusion first. I think the stage is vast. Therefore, there is a lot of space for everybody. Therefore, it isn't that China is going to take up all the market. Don't have to worry about that. And it is true, though, that as I said earlier, in terms of DX penetration curve, if the business model is supported mainly by online, like e-commerce and media, clearly Alibaba or Tencent, these two major Chinese techs, are making investment or making acquisition. That is true. Having said that, as I confirmed earlier, outside the net, outside the internet, on the various frontiers, DX is making a progress. So the market and stage is so vast. Therefore, the companies, including Japanese companies or all the players, have a room to play.
ありがとうございます。
Thank you. Because of the time constraints, this is going to be the last question. So looking at Japanese companies, what should they do? At the end of your presentation, you said that Japanese companies have a room to play their role. Can you expand that further? Would you like to?
はい。
Yes, thank you. As I said earlier, the market environment is very different between Japan and other markets. Therefore, you need some people who can guide you in local markets. From JETRO as well, since several years ago, we received the statistics. What kind of the investment type is making a benefit? the not independent or the joint venture, rather startup investment or acquisition. So these two are the ones which make most profitable investment. So we have such data and statistics. So then what kind of combination can you make? The joint venture or the full acquisition, or the in between there is a minority investment or capital tie-up. So in conclusion, maybe you have to do all these types of investment. Based on my experience, I can say that those who are successful, they are making investment into multiple companies in order to select the best one and best type of investment based on their experience. So rather than investing one big major investment, of course that is up to a company in terms of investment strategy. However, including seed, early stage, when it comes to startups, if the companies are successful, the market cap jumps up very significantly and exponentially. So the growth is very fast in some cases. Of course, it is a little bit risky, but maybe you can consider the tie-up or the equity investment from early startup phase. Of course, there is risk involved. So in our business as well, this is risky business. So you have to diversify your investment. You invest in multiple companies, and only one or two companies are successful. You expand that investment going forward.
ございました。
Well, thank you so much. I know there are so many questions are remaining, but because of the constraints of time, we need to move on. Competition is intensifying, but there are lots of opportunities out there still. So there are lots of room left for Japanese companies to do a job. So thank you so much, Mr. Ibihara, for a wonderful contribution. Thank you. Bye. So about the startups in Southeast Asia, on the 28th, last day, on Friday this week, there's another session for you. So I hope you will join us then too. Let's continue and take up the topic of exploring frontier with the challenges of a Japanese company. We have two companies here. From MBK Healthcare Management, President Mr. Saito. Mitsui had investment into a IHH, largest hospital group in Southeast Asia, one of the largest, and he has been long engaged in the management of that. And he's going to introduce us about what he's doing in this healthcare area. Mr. Saito, thank you for waiting. Would you like to take the floor? Thank you. Thank you for your introduction. I'm Saito from MBK Healthcare Management, which is a company invested by Mitsui. So I'd like to talk about the IHH, our core business, and think about how we should manage the healthcare-related companies. Would you like to see the slide? In 2011, we made an initial investment, and last year we made a second investment, and as described to you, IHH. In 2011, we've been investing in this area, and we had acquired a Chivalent Group, and in 2018, we also invested into Nimble Fortis. So we used to have 16 hospitals, but now we have 80 hospitals over 10, and we have more than 15,000 beds, starting from 3,500. In Malaysia, Singapore, Turkey, India is our market. where we rank 1 or 2 in terms of the market share. As for the pandemic, of course, it has given a great impact on the business of IHH. And the performance is trending to pick up and recover. And we are cooperating with the government and providing the hospital facilities and the vaccination facilities. And for CPR tests as well, we are engaged in the lab-related businesses. It's one of the largest in scale in Southeast Asia, and doing a job on the PCR test front as well. So this is a growth strategy after our additional investment last year. So we have become the largest shareholder since. And I'd like to tell you about the strategy. So we have secondees to IHH. We have strengthened the managerial foundation. After the additional investment, management have been strengthened. And global IHH strategy is something is being formulated so that synergy can be created from mid to long-term point of view instead of a short-term point of view. And we are centralizing the purchase control and having a largest scale lab-related activities in Southeast Asia and strengthening the overall business so that we can strengthen our healthcare-related businesses. And we are doing a PMI in India and Turkey, and as well in 2008. We have a Fortis to which we made an investment. And turnaround have been conducted for the hospitals that we invested in Turkey last year or recently. Because of the situation in Turkey, the foreign currency denominated loan have been reduced greatly. And working on the medical tourism involving Turkish hospitals. The third one is a cluster strategy. We are introducing large-scale hospitals. That used to be our strategy. But we will clarify the function of hospitals going forward so that productivity and profitability can be improved depending on the market. There was a cannibalization and inefficiency experience, but it will be eliminated by making more efficient the organization of hospitals and introducing telemedicine as well. Division of labor will be done based on the concentration and selection. Next. I'd like to tell you about the 3 pillars of our new growth strategy. One is the making platform for data and DX. I will touch about later. And next is widening the regional expanse. We are still continuing to expand our businesses. But because of the virus, we cannot go cross-border nowadays, so that IHH is looking for businesses in near area, as exemplified by the acquisition of hospitals in Malaysia and so forth. And we have lab-related businesses, image diagnosis businesses, which can be turned into an independent business and can have a spin-out so that the scale merit can be pursued. As I said, we are involved in the lab-related business in a horizontal way. We like to expand that. So under the pandemic, we've been able to do that, and we will continue to do so after the pandemic. Now let me be more concrete in our strategy. You know that the global healthcare market is a growing market because of the increasing chronic diseases and the outbreak and so forth. And the efficiency against the medical care expense need to be improved. But there was a lot of vested interest and inefficiencies in the market. It was not transparent. So this is the area where the data has been lagging behind the most in the world. So smartphone has diffused and big data is now being utilized. And because of the pandemic, non-contact demand had gone up. So the DX can be a way to solve the problems in the healthcare area. Apple Watch and health app, I'm sure many of you are using them. So vital data is kept on the smartphone, which can be shared with hospitals. And maybe the smartphone stored health-related information outnumbers those kept by the hospital. So we really seek to improve further the efficiency. I hope I'm not offending anyone, but the volume and the treatment are still the center incentive for increasing the number of treatment and the testing and so forth. And patients themselves cannot get hold on their own data. They don't know the situation that they are in. So there is an information gap between the hospitals and the patient. But we need to shift to the patient-centered approach from the hospital-centered approach. Patients are to have the ownership in their options. Healthcare Grab. Maybe Uber is more famous here in Japan, but Uber taxi can be hailed through the app, and you know the price in advance. But in case of healthcare, time required, we will never know when the services can be provided, and you never know what the cost will be until you see the meter. So it's strikingly different from the hailing car business. Healthcare is becoming more important, and the prevention will be the focus. And the patient will be at the center from the hospitals, and this is the way we like to go. So this is the last slide. We like to touch upon the Mitsui's concept. Healthcare IT is well advanced in US, like GAFA, Apple, consumer platforms do have a wealth of data and making a value chain anew. In Asia, there is no such platform, so IHH platform can be increased so that adding and taking advantage of the latest technology of Japan and so forth, we would like to make a value-based healthcare ecosystem. Healthcare data were put into the clinical trial and so forth, but personalized medicine and the prevention are the areas that we can work on and hope to contribute to the overall enhancement of the healthcare system. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Saito. You talked about Mitsui and the IHH Care strategy as well as business rollout. Thank you for sharing that. So maybe we can go on to Q&A session. So first question about the digitalization. So you said in your presentation that use of digital technology is important. So in proceeding further with this strategy, what do you think about the partnership with the startups What is your take on working together with startups? Maybe you can have a concrete example in your response. That would be very nice. Thank you. Thank you for your question. First of all, in IHH, we do a cross-border business. So e-record system, health record system, and so forth are the areas that we've been working on very hard. But now we like to extract the data, have a unitary control over it so that it can be fed back to the patient services loop. Like a car company ALM, where this is sort of a telemedicine. The anonymity of data is very important in healthcare area, but data can be utilized for good purpose, sharing the data. Not the traditional vendors, but the startups are offering many good new ideas for sharing the data. So we can use our network and take advantage of innovative technology so that we can roll out something new. Thank you. You talked about ALM. So if you're looking for a partner, do you look at Japanese companies as well, or are you always looking for partners in Southeast Asia? What is your main target for looking for a partner locally? Of course, we are a Japanese company, so we would like to use Japanese companies' technology. But we are not that particular about the country or region. We are always looking for the best technology. As I said in my presentation, with regard to Japan, United States, and Europe, Asia has a shortage of volume, quantity. But in terms of the quality of data, they are quickly catching up with the rest of the advanced world. So Japanese or European or American technology can be brought into Southeast Asia so that they can make a quick progress. Thank you. Now let's move on. About the localization. Well, you are operating in a large number of countries. Very encouraging story. So this is a matter of healthcare. It has a high potential, but there are much inefficiencies still remaining. And there are differences from country to another, or maybe within a same country, from region to region, there might be some differences in regulations. So in overcoming the local differences, what will be the key? Anything? And also, is there anything that you seek from public side? First of all, as you rightly said, the healthcare is a very local business. But operational engines like concentrated purchases and the data services, it can have a potential for global business. IHH has a strength in the local operation because we have a good local staff. And the headquarters are taking on more global stance. And they're having a good people to support that. Data management is very important. Managing using the data. Particularly, we are located in Singapore, and we have access to China. And there are so many diverse multinational human resources available in Singapore. So I think we have an advantage being located in Singapore. About the cross-border partnership, it's very important for healthcare. So we are cooperating with the government in dealing with the virus. So we can share the data with the government, and appropriate legislation will be needed as well. Thank you. So this is going to be the last question. Very specific question about the telemedicine. So DX is underway in Asia. What cannot be done in Japan can be done in Asia. That's what people say. And the representative example, which is a telemedicine. So if it's all right with you, perhaps you could tell us what you're doing. How far have you come? Or any outlook ahead for telemedicine? Something that Japanese people would like to know. Thank you. For the telemedicine, before the pandemic, we made an investment into a company. We had a domestic operation as well, internal operation as well. And we are working on this front very quickly. So we are going to have a division role amongst the hospitals. And telediagnosis is becoming very important because under the pandemic, if patients don't have to visit the hospital physically, then it can be done remote. And the hospitals can concentrate on the higher level healthcare and so forth. The telemedicine is done locally, like within Singapore and so forth. And the medical tourism is something that we are working on under IHH. And maybe if legislation can be made globally, then the potential will be very large. Thank you. So everything is moving very quickly in the DX, as well as vision when it comes to healthcare. Thank you for telling us a story with full of dreams. Thank you, Mr. Saito, for your wonderful contribution. Thank you. So let's move on and hear next from our next speaker. Mr. Kawabata from Kawabata, which is located in Toyama Prefecture and has 3 subsidiaries in Southeast Asia. It's a mid-sized company. And is a co-chair of investment committee on the SMEs. So, Mr. Kawabata, please talk about new challenges for SMEs. Mr. Kawabata, would you like to take floor? Yes, thank you. I am Kawabata. Nice to see you. So let's start the slide. My story will be more down to earth than other speakers. I'd like to introduce to you the challenges that we are faced with locally in Southeast Asia, what we are doing in terms of HRD and so forth. In Toyama, we are making a machinery for production purposes. And early 1990s, we went into Southeast Asia, and over a 30-year period, we've been doing businesses in Southeast Asia. Please go to next page. We are operating in Thailand and Philippines and Myanmar. We have 3 subsidiaries, and in Malaysia and Indonesia, we have affiliates. 30 years ago, overseas businesses had started. We took a part in the delegation sent by the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And after the bubble burst, there was a period of stagnation. We were looking for a new market, and we wanted to search to come up with cheap machinery parts, making them locally more inexpensively, and import that back into Japan and so forth. But we made a local company to provide after-sales services and to have a local production of parts. And in around 2010, we wanted to serve the local needs. So initially, we went into overseas by establishing a manufacturing plant, but then we had taken the market as a local market. And we are now having more general view, entire view on the Southeast Asia. Travel is restricted now, so we are having a difficulty, but we are looking beyond the pandemic because it's a good opportunity to reassess our overseas business because each country has each set of problems. We need to live up to the problem and solve them, partnering up with our local companies, and we would like to be proactive on this. I hope many of the SMEs would join us. When SMEs are to operate overseas, there are so many risks. But if you can respond steadily to those challenges, then you can really minimize the risk and avoid the risk. And I would like to continue actively doing businesses overseas. We are working on off-grid electrification in ASEAN because there are so many off-grid areas remaining in ASEAN. We are focused on that. And electrification will bring a big hope because quality of life will go up and the mindset of local people can be improved. We are making machinery for industry purposes, but we also have a production of power generating machine, manufacturing installment of power generation plant. So independent power source is something that we would like to offer and aim at the electrification. We are partnering up with energy companies locally, established a joint venture, and in a limited area, we are working on the off-grid electrification with cooperation from our local governments and working on the generation, distribution, and the metering of the power. International organization, energy service funds, local banks, and so forth, they are cooperating with us to make investment and advance off-grid electrification in villages. So far, in production area, we've been doing business in overseas, and our clients are mostly Japanese businesses. So we went alone in overseas market. But the electrification project is different in character. We have to work together with the local partners and local government, which is very high hurdle to be cleared by SMEs. In 2013, we applied for the JICA program and got the support. Feasibility study was conducted on the electrification business, and it came out that we are needed to be present locally. So we looked for the local partner, and we consulted with JETRO, and we applied for support for Japanese SME overseas business development, and we were adopted, and feasibility study was conducted locally. And in 2015, We also have been entrusted with a consortium for new export donation. And we went to local countries many times, found a local partner, concluded MOU, and established the companies by sequence. In 2017, we were able to establish a local company, and we received guidances as to expanding the market channel. And support for Japanese SME SDGs related business development assistance is something we've been receiving. We were originally scheduled to go a local country last year, but because of the pandemic, we were not, and this program has been suspended. So it's always a good idea for SMEs to use the publicly available assistance programs. We've done that, and we've been helped by that a great deal. So there are some challenges remaining for SMEs working abroad. One is the human resources issue. We do have experienced staffers, but in view of the continuity of business, we have to take on a new perspective in work on the HRD. And Toyama Prefecture has a program to receive students from ASEAN. The target is a university graduates of ASEAN region and do a matching and have them undergo master's program at the prestigious universities in Toyama and find a job for them after graduation. Tuition and the expenses will be provided by the government, mainly locally. And it's a very good program. It started since 2016. And the 7 countries, 18 people altogether have come from ASEAN, and currently 14 of them had finished graduate school program and found a job locally, and remainder is still at school. And since last April, 1 person joined the company, and 1 more is studying at the graduate school. And people would join us after this program, but they will eventually go back to their country and can be a manager locally. That's the career path that we are thinking. Digitalization is progressing, changing the job description. So I'm sure that overseas business would change as well accordingly. We hope to find a new way to work further with our local partners in ASEAN. That would be very nice. We will be more proactive and be proactive in doing local business in overseas. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kawabata. You talked about your businesses in Southeast Asia as well as your work on HRD. So let's move on to Q&A. There are some questions coming in. About off-grid electrification project that you talked about, there is a question there. In proceeding with a project, how did you procure the fund necessary? Also, I have an additional question on that. You were talking about new projects. If you are to challenge a new project, you need to think about risks, right? You talked about there is always a risk accompanied by doing business in Southeast Asia. So what are the things that need to be considered before challenging on a new business? About the funding part, off-grid electrification project, usually the villages do not have much money, and government doesn't have ample funding either. It's usually the case. So what we are doing is to co-work with other businesses and get the cooperation from international organizations in finding And partly we may form a fund and collect funds, raise funds. Working together with a local partner is a most important point. Because going alone is very difficult, too challenging. So we need to work together with a local partner. That's the crucial point. And you have to have a local people's perspective, not your own. You need to look at things through the lens of local people. That's important. So this is a human-to-human connection, trusting relationship that needs to be built. Thank you. Second question about the human resources. So you've been long engaged in the HRD front as well. So throughout your experience, particularly focused on Southeast Asia, what is your take on the quality of human power available there? Any changes? So SMEs are looking for a potential talent to take on the managerial job in future. So what do you think about the promising nature of local people? So if we go back 20 years, I see the changes taking place in the quality of local human resources. Because there are lots of outstanding people in ASEAN who are always looking for nice jobs. So for SMEs, ASEAN is a rich pool of good human resources. I told you about the ASEAN students program. And they can come and study at the Japanese schools and can be a candidate for future management locally when they go back to the country. And we have a AOTS program, technological. Using the technology, the emerging markets can be explored. And AOTS offers a program that we are using. And they are offering a very good Japanese language course. After learning the Japanese language, people come to receive training at the companies. So people who worked for a company in Toyama go back to their own country and later become a member of the management locally. Thank you. Last question. Well, many of the managers of SMEs are attending today's seminar program. So any message that you can give to them, hints about interacting with Southeast Asian counterpart and ASEAN counterpart. I hope more SMEs will go out to overseas to do their business. First, you have to have an interest in doing business overseas. So you need a little bit of courage to start anew and embark upon an overseas business. It can be just a small motivation. You can start humble and very small. You don't have to go all big all at once. ASEAN is an optimum place for Japanese people to work in and the optimum place for making products and very good, attractive market. I hope you can take interest. Attend the JETRO seminar, for example, as a starter. That can be a good motivation for you. Thank you. It was very valuable suggestion for the SME people who have been listening into the program. I come from the government side, and I'm very happy to see that many companies are actually using and taking part the public sector offered programs. And you are also passionate about human resource development locally as well. It was very informative. Thank you. Thank you. As for the SMEs business in ASEAN tomorrow on the 25th as well in the afternoon, starting from 2 p.m., there is going to be a special session. I hope you can take a part there too. No, thank you for waiting. We are going to hear from our last speaker for today. Research Institute, Representative Institute, Area, COO. Mr. Hachiyama Koichi is here with us. ASEAN leading the world post-corona. Challenges and responses of ASEAN will be covered. Thank you for waiting, Mr. Hachiyama. Would you like to take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Kobayashi, for the kind introduction. I am a CEO of AREA. My name is Hachiyama. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. AREA, some of you may not know about AREA, but East Asia, particularly ASEAN region-related economy, is the target of our research. This is an international organization making policy recommendations. From my perspective, I would like to talk about ASEAN to lead the post-COVID-19 world. I would like to cite some recent examples and what kind of business opportunities are being offered to Japanese companies. Can I have my slide? I would like to have a screen shared. Do you have my slides on screen? Now, first of all, the first topic is as follows. This is a COVID-19 impact in ASEAN. Under the pandemic since 2020, that year, ASEAN will have only minus 3.3%, which is about the same as the world average. However, if you look at closely, it is true that service industry like tourism suffered a lot because of lockdown measures. However, when it comes to manufacturing, there is an international production network which is resilient to shocks. We call it IPM. And thanks to IPN, manufacturing industry shrunk only temporarily. And this year, 2021, it is likely to recover to the pre-pandemic economic scale. So as you can see the table down below, after this year, ASEAN is likely to achieve more than 5% higher than other regions in the world. Therefore, even after the pandemic, ASEAN continues to be the fastest growing region of the world. Next. Now, manufacturing industry that I mentioned briefly, let's look at it more closely. These graphs shows the machinery trade, electric machinery. The purple line shows ASEAN. In the first half of 2020, due to the pandemic, the trade between ASEAN and Japan shrunk temporarily. However, quickly it recovered to the pre-shock levels. So East Asia and ASEAN region has a IPN, International Production Network, and the IPN functioned effectively even with the pandemic. And IPN was a factor that mitigated COVID impact in ASEAN. Next, the area our institution conducted a survey regarding manufacturing and non-manufacturing industry of ASEAN and India. According to the survey, in 2020, under the pandemic, the business performances show that there are many companies who suffered a loss of profits. However, there are companies which grew, so the picture is quite mixed. Now, going forward, the employment outlook for coming year or two, many companies said the employment outlook for the next 2 years is quite positive, showing that the recovery is taking place. According to the same survey, whether or not they reviewed the supply chain because of COVID-19, many companies actually responded to COVID-19 by modifying supply chains. And those companies who conducted a change to supply chain, they said the changes in the order of 10 to 30% has been done by many companies, and also many companies plan to implement mid to long-term rather than short-term changes. So in this way, we can see the industrial dynamism of the region moving into a new recovery path. According to the same area survey, we asked what kind of responses you took to COVID-19. The more than 60% companies said they suspended non-essential business trips in order to reduce costs, so they are rather more passive response. On the other hand, there are companies which made a digitalization effort with injection of additional resources and to be more prepared for next shocks. So there are companies, about 20% of respondents, who have taken more proactive additional measures. In this way, the ASEAN is likely to achieve a higher growth in the future, and also ASEAN businesses are showing continued dynamism. However, after the COVID-19, perhaps the companies are quite slow in making digitalization effort. Next, then digitalization in ASEAN, what kind of measures are being taken? First of all, the very basic effort in digitalization is e-commerce. So regarding e-commerce, ASEAN, China, and India, if we look at the market share in e-commerce in the world, in 2017, their combined market share was 43%, but it will likely to increase more than 50%. So from the China 12.5%, India 17.7%, ASEAN 20%. That is an expected average growth rate between 2019 and 2023. So ASEAN is expected to grow faster. Now, the e-commerce market in ASEAN, Indonesian market is the largest and fastest growing market. And for example, in 2019, Indonesia's share of revenue in e-commerce was 53.7 in 2019. It will increase to 57% in 2024. However, the Thailand and Vietnam combined, it will decline from 25% in 2019 to less than 22% in 2024. In the number of e-commerce users, Indonesia has the largest number of users, accounting for 48.8%. In this way, Indonesia accounts for a large share when it comes to e-commerce in ASEAN market. Now, next important effort is e-government, digitalization of government services. Promotion of e-government is to spearhead overall social digitalization move. According to United Nations survey of e-government, Group 1 includes Singapore, where e-government efforts is making the fastest progress, particularly Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, and Myanmar. They are lagging behind. So in the parentheses, you can see the world ranking of the different countries. Now, next is e-government In order to promote e-government, the essential tool is e-ID. In Japan, we call it My Number Card. In the ASEAN, Cambodia, Laos, PDR, and Myanmar and Vietnam, except for CLMV, the member states have introduced EID to a different degrees. However, the system is being introduced, and therefore the system will disseminated in the future and be taken up by the citizens. So incidentally, EID attached to services. So different countries has a different service menu. Singapore has most diverse services attached to EID. In the case of Japan too, My Number Card does not have much attached services. Therefore, we can grow together in this area. On the other hand, security countermeasures have to be taken. Even if you promote digitalization, if you don't take cybersecurity measures, there will be a heightened risk, and that could lead to severe accidents damaging the economy as a whole. This is according to E-Government Academy of Estonia. This shows ASEAN Government Security Index. And you can see some countries in bold where advancement is being made. So in many countries, we are seeing a digitalization progressing. But when it comes to cybersecurity measures, they are lagging behind. On the right-hand side, you can see if you have bigger negative numbers, that means that cyber security is lagging. So most of the member states are lagging behind. For your reference, you can see Japan on the bottom of the table. Again, Japan is lagging behind in terms of cybersecurity comparison to digitalization progress. So Japan has a risk as well. Now, against this backdrop, in area, security, if security measures are not taken, what happens if digitalization progresses without security measures? Now, the so-called open SNMP, meaning the devices connected to network without the proper management, there is a negative correlation between labor force as a share of total population and open SNMP. Using this data, we have a simple model to be applied to Indonesian situation. Going forward, open service utilization increases by 10%. That means digitalization will progress. Then the share of labor force decreases by 3%. That means that there is a decline of GDP between $24 to $29 billion. This is only simple calculation. But in any case, if digitalization advances rapidly without cybersecurity measures, that would damage real economy because of lack of cybersecurity countermeasures. Let me summarize about the digitalization. The potentials of ASEAN in terms of digitalization is very high, and they are working together between government and private sectors, so they are expected to make a leapfrog. And also, data free flow idea is making penetration. So if we consider ASEAN as a whole as a one digital market, based on the assumption that ASEAN will grow very rapidly, ASEAN will be a huge digital player, and ASEAN will be a major player in the world economy. But on the other hand, if the security measures do not catch up with digitalization, then it will be a problem. However, on the contrary, it offers business opportunities as well. And so far, ASEAN has been developing digitalization using e-commerce or on a sectoral basis. However, going forward, digital transformation is to be introduced. Then it will move to digital transformation stage where common data infrastructure is to be built. So Japanese technology can make an active contribution to the development of ASEAN together. Therefore, I hope that the Japanese companies will take up this opportunity to be involved in digitalization move of ASEAN. Last topic is a circular economy related efforts in ASEAN. Circular economy, this way of thinking is not anything new, But recently, thanks to rapid progress of technology and the increase of people's interest, this concept will become a mainstay concept of global economy. So recycle embedded the products and also energy transformation, energy transition, smart city, and decarbonization, and so forth. As a concept that would lead ASEAN economy growth, this concept is a main theme for this year's ASEAN conferences. Therefore, in order to build a circular economy, there will be many private investment to be made and to change a social system. Now, as you can see from this map, it doesn't require any explanation, but already in ASEAN countries, grain procurement and also waste management, and these initiatives and plans are being implemented in various countries of ASEAN. So going forward, when ASEAN economy will transform into circular economy, what is important is first you have to have a conceptualization. As you can see, the recycling of resources and reusing of waste as resources, and the high priority has to be given to such efforts. And also you have to remodel business model for new and creative business. So in this way, circular economy concept has to take root. And ASEAN has already moved from conceptualization phase to implementation stage. Now in ASEAN, in order to promote circular economy, area considers there are 6 principles we analyzed. Principle number 1, as I said earlier, international production network. Based on that, concept has to be made. And number 2 is the circular economy has to contribute to promotion of ASEAN economic integration. And third, particularly with SMEs, production cost, and also the impact on market price has to be sufficiently assessed. And also you have to narrow perception gap, and we have to recognize that circular economy will make a long-term growth contribution. Also, ASEAN way has to be respected in order to ensure coordination among ASEAN countries. And also, sixth, before we start business, we have to secure sustainable finance and feasibility. By using these principles, we can have outcomes such as place policy framework, institutionalization, and also awareness raising and cross-cutting efforts, partnership and collaboration, and circular economy industry 4. Lastly, let me summarize about circular economy. Circular economy is a key theme for this year's ASEAN meetings as a concept to attract new technologies and investment and drive ASEAN growth. Circular economy, for that, governments have to lay out broad direction in order to give assurance to private sectors. And actually, ASEAN have laid out such broad direction for circular economy. Therefore, going forward, I am sure that a lot of private sector investment will be made. So Japan has a very advanced technology. Therefore, it is better that Japanese companies will be involved in the ASEAN economy's circular economy move right from the beginning, so that Japan can grow significantly together with ASEAN. So the ASEAN remains to be highly potential, the highest potential growth regions. ASEAN and Japan are old friends, and by working together, ASEAN and Japan are likely to grow significantly together. Thank you.
はい、八山様。
Thank you, Mr. Hachiyama. It was a valuable contribution. Let's move on to Q&A. First point, I have a question about the digitalization. The participants came up with one question. Well, e-commerce is progressing so much in Indonesia. Is there any particular reason for that? Please.
Yes, Indonesia is ahead of others. There are many factors involved. Firstly, the smartphone penetration is very high, maybe higher than Japanese case. And also geographically, it is an island country, so maybe e-commerce is very attuned to such environment. So already digitalization is penetrated and population is huge. As a result, Indonesia has made a great stride, in my view.
もう一つ
Well, thank you. One more question about the digitalization. You said in your presentation that cybersecurity is still fragile and vulnerable. Look at Japan. When they engaged in the digitalization-related business in overseas data free flow with trust, the trust portion is very important. So there is a market potential there, but there might be some institutional vulnerability still remaining, which can be a hindrance for Japanese companies to work in this area overseas. If your answer is yes, who will be able to overcome that challenge? ASEAN would solve the question, or what could Japan do in that concept? Businesses, governments, they each have a role to play, but is there any expectations you have?
Thank you. Yes, it is true. Emphasized the security issue earlier, but given the current situation, in reality, it is true that we have concern over security, cybersecurity. Having said that, in ASEAN as well, security and protection of personal data, they are increasingly aware of the importance of these issues. ASEAN countries are now starting to implement the system for the protection. That what is important is this region as a whole has to move into that same direction at the same pace. So in that sense, the ASEAN members have to coordinate with each other and collaborate with each other. So in doing so, Japan going forward, Japanese companies, when they do business in ASEAN regions, Japanese type security or the Japanese way of protection of personal data and the way of thinking has to be shared with ASEAN. Maybe Japanese government companies should be involved in such an endeavor. And the government is also promoting assistance in this area as well. But of course, Japan, as I said earlier, is not perfect. It is still a cyber security fragile country. So together, maybe Japan and ASEAN countries can work together to build an appropriate system.
Thank you. About the circular economy, there is a question. Of course, the business opportunities will become bigger, and in that context, sustainability, particularly the financial sustainability, is also important. So related to circular economy, what do you think about the green financing, its bankability, for instance? There are needs out there, but how much of it can be viable in terms of the businesses? So what do you think about the business viability of the circular economy, inclusive of the sustainable finance? Is there any institutional challenges that awaits to be solved?
Yes, as you said, circular economy will transform the social system significantly. Therefore, if it goes on the right track, it will create a business opportunities. However, until we reach that stage, it requires initial investment of huge amount. And if there is no prospect for the future, people don't want to invest. So in that sense, as I said in the presentation, the governments has to take the initiative. They have to show the broad direction for circular economy. That is extremely important. With that, the private sector companies will be able to have a peace of mind and invest. So a circular economy, the policy framework I mentioned, but at the end of the day, the government's policy framework has to embed a circular economy concept, and they have to show what kind of circular economy they want to build as a country. So the institution, system, maybe laws in some cases. So circular economy have to be embedded in those institutions and the laws. That is extremely important. By so doing, people's awareness will be raised, and there will be a good matching between people's awareness and government policy framework. So in Japan too, SDGs, that is a UN target, and globally we are moving into the same direction when it comes to SDGs. Therefore, I think we are moving into circular economy, so we have to create the necessary frameworks.
Thank you. Related to environment, with regard to energy transition, there is one confirmation I would like to make with you. So at the very outset, Minister Kajiyama, meeting minister, said that in Asia, the Asian energy transition roadmap will be necessary, and Japan is ready to offer support. So, Mr. Hachiyama, you come from area, and I'm sure that you are working hard at it. So on Wednesday, there is another session coming up, but throughout the week, maybe we have big expectations on this topic.
Yes, the day after tomorrow, on Wednesday, senior economist Humin is going to speak. He represents area. He speaks exactly on that point. So for details, I refer to that session. But the way of thinking is as follows. In each country, each region, energy-related environment varies. Therefore, the ASEAN's reality has to be understood. What kind of energy sources are being used and what is the relevant environment for that. Based on that kind of realistic analysis, in what way are we going to move to no carbon economy? And we have to make a scenario based on that. And based on that scenario, we have to analyze challenges on the ground. Otherwise, it will be a pie in the sky. So on that aspect, area conducts research as well. For details, please wait until Wednesday's presentation.
Well, thank you. So we exceeded the time. So this is going to be the last question from me about the mid to long-term potential of ASEAN. At the very outset, you talked about the impact of a pandemic. And still, countries are fraught with the issue of a spreading infection. But of course, overall, economy would recover, but maybe ASEAN can be a little bit lagging behind. Looking 5 years ahead or 10 years ahead, what do you think about the overall potential of this entire region? That would be the concluding question for you.
Thank you very much. Yes, exactly. That point is the most important point. In my presentation, I talked about the results of our research and survey. And all in all, of course, there is a pandemic impact. However, compared to a global standard, the impact in ASEAN is relatively small. So ASEAN's connectivity network, the way network is being promoted could be a world model in the future, and we have high expectations for that. So in that sense, after the pandemic winds down, perhaps the ASEAN remains to be considered as a growth center, just as it was considered before the pandemic. However, there are some challenges. In my view, there are two challenges. One is digitalization. Digitalization, so far, as I said, it is making progress. And also, according to other speakers today, digitalization is making significant progress. That is true. However, due to the pandemic, as we often say, new normal, perhaps, again, new area has to be opened up. in order to promote digitalization further. It is not applicable only to ASEAN, but to other countries in the world as well. So there are many things to be done going forward. So how are we going to promote these issues, a challenge as the region? And second point, that having been said, globally, including ASEAN, we have been significantly affected by the pandemic, and also industrially, we suffered much impact, particularly service industry, including tourism. How are you going to rebuild such industries, particularly when it comes to tourism? It is a very important industry with huge impact for ASEAN economy, but as you know, due to the pandemic, it was damaged very much. How are we going to recover tourism? It is very important when we look at the future potentials of ASEAN. In order to rebuild tourism, I think it is important to contain the pandemic, and the vaccination is an important key. And after the vaccine rollout, not only providing a peace of mind for travelers thanks to vaccination, maybe ASEAN should come up with new ideas and new ways of travel and trips. So ASEAN is, of course, fully aware of this need. So the new way of tourism in the future for ASEAN is being discussed by ASEAN as well. Therefore, digitalization and tourism, these are the areas where much effort would be needed in order to make a growth in the future.
はい、ありがとうございます。
Well, thank you so much. We talked about the future potential, growth potential of ASEAN, but still, the potential is very high even after the pandemic. But there are certain challenges that needs to be overcome, and one of the tools to do that is the digitalization. Previous speakers have talked about that, and that's where business opportunities can be found. And Japan should get a piece of it. Well, Mr. Hachiyama, thank you so much for your wonderful contribution. Thank you.
Distinguished speakers, Mr. Kobayashi, thank you very much. Listening to the speakers working at the forefront of ASEAN business, and also live Q&A with audience, I could feel the speed of business transformation in the region and potential business opportunities for business companies. So 2 hours seemed so short. So this concludes the session for day 1. Tomorrow, on the 25th of May, day 2, from noon, we will have a session on SDGs and business contribution in Southeast Asia. From 1400, we have a session on growing opportunity for SMEs in ASEAN region. So for the second session, growing opportunity for SMEs in ASEAN region, those of you who signed up for that, we have sent you the Zoom webinar invitation. Please access to the right URL. For YouTube Live on this end, from 1400, we are going to air this growing opportunity for SMEs in ASEAN region session. Thank you very much for attending day 1 of ASEAN-Japan Business Week for innovative and sustainable growth.